When you look at high-rise Los Angeles, it is easy to forget that this used to be Mexico. And yet not far to the east of the city lies an Hispanic community where English is rarely spoken. These people are proud to be Americans, but the Mexican culture is still very much alive here, and since 1988, the center of what some people call a miracle. Here, the lives of thousands of people have been touched by crosses glowing through the windows of homes in this community. Dramatic changes in people's lives have been reported after they have visited these crosses, and many are claiming to be cured of serious physical diseases and mental problems. Press coverage was a mixture of seriousness and skepticism. Television stations and newspapers reported only on the first 2 crosses, even though all of the crosses were inspirational to the people closest to them.
On the 20th of May, by the light of a ray, a cross in a window is imprinted, and people are returning where it is appearing, and each day the miracle grows.
I believe it's a sign. I really do. It's blessed us. It's blessed our home. Everyone that has come to see this cross, it's blessed them. I've heard miracles. I've heard healings. I know what it's done for me, my daughter, my husband, our marriage.
This is the Vega family, all of them deeply affected by the appearance of a cross in their window.
Cross first appeared on Memorial Day. My son went out that night. He came home around maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and before he went to bed, he went to the restroom, and he came out screaming that we had a cross. And I told him, "You better go back to sleep, kid." I said, you're dreaming. And no, he insisted. He woke everybody up, and we got up, and sure enough, there was a big cross in the window. When it first appeared, it was really like a big cross full of energy. It lit up the whole restroom. It was really glowing. And it was just something to, just can't imagine, when it first appeared, because we never had anything like that.
Before the cross appeared, Lorraine Vega was bedridden with heart and lung disease and had given up hope.
Mentally and physically,
after they discovered the cross, her health was restored.
And when that cross appeared, you wouldn't believe it. From day one, from that night, I didn't have to take any medicine. I felt a load just lift up. I just feel great.
Lorraine's daughter Mindy considers the birth of her daughter Desiree a miracle resulting from the appearance of the cross.
For bleeding continuously throughout my pregnancy. When I was 3 months pregnant, I had gone to the doctor, to the emergency once again for the 3rd time, and they finally called in 2 specialists and examined me, took testing, and didn't tell me what the problem was or what they thought it was at the time. They said that they would call me. So 3 days later, the doctor called my mother and told my mother that he had to talk with me and that it was very important. I was at work at the time, so my mother gave the doctor the phone number to my job. So he called me at work, and he told me that they needed to see me right away within the next 2 or 3 days to talk about an abortion, because they believed that I had a tubular pregnancy. And I was lost with words. All I could do was cry. It's my baby. So I went back and I told my mom, called my mom, and she told me, don't worry, just to pray. And I really didn't have that much faith. And now I know this is a miracle, because when I went back, the doctor told me he didn't understand that I had a normal fetus. They don't know how, why, how, or what happened, and I believe to this day it was through prayer and faith in God.
See, that's like what we didn't do before. We didn't pray together like a family, and now we rely on prayer a lot now. Every time we get in trouble or we have a problem, that we all pray, and it seems like it works. It really works.
Within several blocks of each other, in the bathroom windows of at least 12 homes, glowing crosses of light appeared within a 2-week period in mid-May 1988. At the same time that the crosses began to appear, residents noticed changes occurring. They saw more harmony in their families and a deep feeling of peace. They noticed their children starting to do better in school, teenagers who had run away returning home, and troubled marriages reconciled. Senora Samaniego, who lives across the street from a park, has noticed improvements in her neighborhood since her cross appeared.
Que en ese tiempo le digo que había muchas gangas.
We used to have a lot of gangs and vagrancy and drugs, and the police used to come all the time. Now it's calmed down more in the park and there's more tranquility, and I've noticed a lot of change.
Pilgrims keep coming to visit the many crosses, some from thousands of miles away.
And this is a bedroom, not a bathroom. I get excited because I'm so full of joy inside. I want to share it with the whole world.
The crosses kept increasing and the pilgrims kept coming. When we began this documentary, there were 3 crosses. By the last day of shooting, there were more than 20.
Oh my God.
The crosses appear in opaque glass and have the same basic shape, all with a diamond around the outside. And all appear to float on the other side of the glass. Every cross also has a slight rectangular thickening in one of the crossbars. The diamond and the thickening are not always seen from every point of view, but they are on every cross. This is an Ojo del Dios, a God's Eye, an ancient Hispanic cross which bears a curious resemblance to the crosses in the windows. A single-pointed light source is always on the other side of the glass when the cross appears. In most cases, it is a bare bulb. Other light sources also reveal the cross, a candle, or a flashlight, or even the moon. Standard opaque glass reveals this square shape. The glass in this window is the same on both sides, even purchased from the same glass company on the same date, but the cross didn't appear until 2 years later. We went to several glass shops looking for pieces of this same kind of glass, but the glassmen told us they had never seen a cross in glass before. We had samples cut of the same waffle-textured glass through which we had seen the crosses in El Monte. We tested each piece of glass with the same kinds of single-pointed light sources that we had tried behind the cross windows, but we continued to get only a square shape. Nonetheless, couldn't these crosses in the glass be just a natural function of the glass itself? This scientist says it is.
Glass, if it was clear, would not cause any sort of diffraction or very little bit of diffraction. There would be some refraction, but not diffraction. But as you can see with this piece of glass, there's a pattern of lines and ridges on here. And so these ridges do indeed cause the light first to be bent or refracted, and then once they come on the other side of the glass, they interfere with one another. We can observe this by using a candle as a point light source. And if we look at it from behind, we can see how the pattern is formed here as a result of the light rays being bent by the glass as it changes speed, but also the slits or the ridges in the glass cause them to come out and interfere with one another, and hence the pattern of dark lines and light lines forming what you see right now. With me, I do have a window from one of the houses that did have the cross formation. And this piece of glass is just seemingly just like any other piece of glass. It does have a pattern on it. And scientific explanation for it is the same. The light passing through the glass is being refracted, and then once it comes out the other side, there is interference caused by the ridges in this glass.
That would seem to settle the issue, except for the healings people reported, such as this lady who was healed from a breast lump. When we found B. Medina, she told us that even her doctor said it was a miracle. She was the first person to be healed in the presence of the first cross.
At work, they have this mobile, and they do cancer screens, and they found that I had a lump. So I went to the surgeon. He says he wanted to have a ultrasound on my breast. So we went and had an ultrasound, and when the report went to the doctor, it was nothing there. So all this time, this happened before the cross, and after the cross, my lump disappeared. So I give thanks to God for that.
The pane of glass holding the cross was taken out on request of the people. At first, they were very zealous about having a religious crowd coming and viewing the cross, which they also viewed to be a miracle. After a while, though, like a lot of natural phenomena, the crowd pulsated, it grew a little bit more excited, and it became too much of a drain on the family living inside the apartment.
So then what happened?
We had an officer come. It was actually the people who lived inside of the residence that removed the pane of glass. The officer escorted them into the patrol car. They were then taken to a nearby church so they could donate the pane of glass to a church.
Did you hear what happened at the church and after that?
I believe it was examined by a priest, and he didn't back or discount anything regarding a miracle.
We found the priest, Padre Pedro Maria, at the Guadalupe Church, and asked him to confirm stories that when the pane of glass was brought to the church, the cross would not appear. Some of the people said that God wanted the cross to be seen by all religions and not just by Christians, and that is why it would not appear in the church. Padre Pedro explains.
I already knew there had to be a direct light source to reveal the cross. They tried several light sources, even a flashlight that they move around, to try various positions trying to make the cross show. They were surprised that they could not see the cross, so they took it back home. The people told me the cross come back as soon as they arrive home.
Mom, someone's here to see the cross.
Mercedes Juarez now has opened up her home as a meeting place for people of the community and elsewhere to see the cross.
Hi, come on in. The cross is this way. This way. If you just follow me.
After bringing the cross back from the church, she now has it in her living room as part of an altar.
There it is.
She believes that many of those who have come to pray at her cross have received healings through it. Senora Juarez had 2 miracles of her own. Because of a damaged uterus, the doctor said she could not have a 4th child, but she did have that child and was cured from her epilepsy as well. She encourages others to ask for healings too, believing that Jesus heals through the cross.
Jesus is the one that makes the miracles. When we gather in prayer, we truly believe in his words. He says, when 2 or 3 gather in my name, I am there. And we feel his presence, and all the miracles come from him. Not from any human, but from him, from Jesus himself, because he created us. The Bible says that he weaved our bodies in the womb of our mothers. So if he created us and created our organs, he can surely create them again. And that's exactly what is happening. When we pray and people get healed, it's because we ask Jesus to create a new organ again. That happened to me. He gave me a new womb, a perfect one. And this is the proof. We have this beautiful baby. And it's the same thing with other people that have come with problems, physical problems. People come to pray. Most of the people that have come to see the cross, they come with a need, usually a physical healing that they ask God for. Sometimes they also have moral wounds, I would say. And the people that are here praying right now, they are praying for a healing for this little girl. Oh, Lord Jesus, help. God had made many miracles happen through prayer and through this cross. I truly believe that it is through this cross too, because when we pray, the light of the cross gets brighter. And again, I remember the scripture that says, our light is from your light. And miracles do happen.
Other crosses began to appear outside the Hispanic community, where some people give non-religious interpretations to their significance. Carol Farina found that her cross dramatically increased her creativity.
I also think that these crosses are a sign of change and transformation that the people of this earth need to start making by getting in touch with the light within themselves, the energy, the power that they have to make the changes regarding things like world hunger, pollution, water supplies, air.
Meanwhile, several months later in El Monte, the first crosses to appear were still shining forth.
La cruz está alrededor de la casa. Sígame.
All of the families who have homes with crosses are very gracious about showing visitors around. Amongst the people in whose lives dramatic changes have been reported, many were troubled teenagers. We interviewed one of them near this cross, which she describes as having dramatically changed her life.
A beautiful cross of light appeared in my mother's window during a very hard time in my life. And when I saw the cross of light, an amazing wave of joy and peacefulness washed over me. And it was then that I realized that I'd have the strength to make it through anything. Another girl I know of was so depressed that she tried to commit suicide. But a couple weeks later, she saw a cross of light, and she said, like me, it changed her life. She said that she used to be a real meanie and didn't want anything for herself or for anybody else. And now she says that she doesn't need a psychiatrist, she feels healthy, and she believes in herself.
At first, people arrived in El Monte by the busload. Since then, rarely does a day go by that someone doesn't come to see one or more of the many crosses. Larry Smart was a visitor from out of town, and later saw a cross appear in his own home.
6 months later, I was awoken in the middle of the night, went into the bathroom, and I noticed a big bright light coming through the window, so I went and looked out and saw who had the spotlight on us. And amazing, there was a cross burning in the window. It looked like it was burning. It was a big glow, and I woke my wife up immediately. I said, honey, you got to see this. She went up there, she looked at it, and she said, oh my God, and went back to bed, woke up the next morning and said, did I see what I thought I saw? I said, yes. And every night since, it's usually every night anyway, we go to look at it, and a lot of times I wind up praying to it. I don't know why I don't use drugs anymore. You know, it's God or something. It's the only reason I'm still sober. And I lost total craving, and that's what I asked for when I first saw it, to relieve my addiction to drugs and alcohol. And that obsession was immediately taken away. That's about all I can really say about it. You know, it's turned my life around totally.
Other crosses appeared in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and this one in Canada.
Well, I was skeptical at first, too. I thought it would go away. I thought it's just a figment of my imagination, but it stayed there. I checked it daylight, and I checked it at night, and different sources of light, and it stayed there. And there is a great deal of energy that comes from that. It feels like a healing, peaceful energy.
Doctors are reluctant to admit that non-medical cures happen, and much in the medical records lacks definitive proof. And yet this document prescribes corrective lenses that the patient never needed, because after praying to the cross, her eyesight was fully restored.
The medical records of the people involved in this documentary are not what we would call provative in terms of what medicine considers proof. All of the people who have talked about healing have talked about healing of problems that we see go into remission by themselves. Some of them actually could be proven if we had new x-rays that showed the disappearance of the lump, for example, in the mammogram. But once the person feels healed, they don't go back to the doctor. In fact, oftentimes they tend to lose faith in the medical profession because they think, if there's all this power here, why should I deal with the doctor? Now, I was impressed basically with two of the healings that went on, and that's the one who was an alcohol and drug addict, and also with the teenager who was the usual obstreperous teenager who settle down and seem to have matured about 4 years in about 1 week. And then oftentimes, if the person believes something strongly enough, the person will get well.
Indeed, most of the people who have come in contact with these crosses believe they are being deeply touched. Even though the people with crosses did not know about each other, they all had remarkably similar responses when interviewed. Whether people are religious or not, they all said the crosses bring hope for the world, the solving of humanity's worst problems, the end of hunger, peace on earth, and a return to the world of a Messiah who has been long awaited.
The coming of the Lord is near, is very near. It's a sign from God.
In the Catholic Church, one of the proofs of God's presence are miracles. We know of the signs, for example, of miracles that happen in Lourdes or in Fatima. And we find in Lourdes the experience of people who had been, and it's a small group of people, but people who had been told by doctors, you will not be healed. And they came and they washed in the water of Lourdes, and they were healed. I mean, they actually were healed. And this was done not just by prejudiced people in favor of this, but prejudiced people against it, people who didn't believe this could ever happen. I think one of the most important questions that each of us has to ask is, what would happen if the second coming happened while we were living? What had happened in my life?
Benjamin Krem, author of The Reappearance of the Christ, says, yes, it is happening right now. And the crosses are part of Christ already making himself felt.
We already are beginning to get reports from various places around the world. One, El Monte, outside of Los Angeles, yes. Crosses appearing in the windows.
Yes.
Is that connected to this?
Indeed, yes. The Christ is manifesting a series of crosses of light all over the world. He said so many that no one could doubt that something extraordinary was happening. And as you know now, there are 12 in the Los Angeles area. And the manifestations of the Virgin, which are taking place all over the world, like at Medjugorje in Yugoslavia,
yes.
Got 25 at sites in Italy, in Ireland, and in Australia, and New Zealand, and all over Europe. And they are the signs of the presence of the Christ. The Christ is really not the name of an individual. It's the name of a great master, a great, powerfully, highly evolved man. In fact, the master of all the masters. And the masters are men like us who have really preceded us in evolution and finished this evolutionary path on which we are all set. His master, the Lord Maitreya, to give him his personal name, who is the master who embodies what we call the Christ principle.
Lord Maitreya is not a name which most Christians would associate with the Christ. What is his relationship to the Christ?
Maitreya and the Christ are one and the same individual, and he worked through Jesus by overshadowing Jesus.
The Messiah is expected now by many Jews. Rabbi Ted Falcon explains.
There are two basic ways that the time for the coming of the Messiah is understood within some of the traditional circles in Jewish tradition. One is through trying to figure out numerologically on the basis of old texts, when, in what year, in what era. And there are those who say, just as we talk about this being the Aquarian age, there are those who are discovering in the flow of the zodiac and the flow of various sections, segments of history, that this is the time when Messiah is supposed to awaken. There are others who look at various world events and say that it's through those world events that the indications of such a coming is to be announced. And those are the ones who look and see that the issues in Israel are harbingers of such a moment now, that the political, the social difficulties, the exacerbation of the violence even there and in the world as a whole speaks the conditions which in fact are required for that messianic being to arrive.
Muslims expect the Imam Mahdi.
I was born and raised in a Muslim family, and Muslims believe that Imam Mahdi, which is the last of 12 imams, Imam is a religious leader. He disappeared, and he is to appear again when the world is full of chaos, and to restore peace and bring good relations among the nations.
And when a cross appeared to his family, Mohammed took it as a sign.
I'm an electronic technician, so I wanted to experiment with light and see whether we have one on our bathroom window. So I took the flashlight in there and checked it out. Every time I got that funny-looking rectangular shape on both of the windows, the left one and the right one. It was amazing. All of a sudden, I get this urge to go and check the window again, the bathroom window. And I take the flashlight with me and go in there and I check it. Sure enough, on the left hand side window, I had that cross of light when I threw the flashlight on it. I think that the one that the followers of all religions believe is coming back is here among us.
I believe that our Lord is coming, and this is a sign.
I believe he's just going to come back to earth and take it over again.
Although this is maybe unexplainable in physical terms, to me this was a sign that his imminent coming.
I think we're ready for it.
I think it's the end of crime and hunger. Maybe peace on earth.
The earth will be renewed. There'll be no more smog. The water will not be contaminated. The water will be clean. The air will be clean. The earth will be renewed. There will be springtime all over the world. There's not going to be any more hunger, and it is going to come to be.
There is a lot of resistance from those who have power when it comes to the fossil fuel industry, possibly the way the banking industry works, possibly the way the media systems work now. And so I think it's up to humanity, it's up to the average people on the street to galvanize themselves, to organize across, various movements to demand that things change where they need to change. And, for me, that would be starting with climate change issues and with issues of preventable disease and starvation, which, we can absolutely fix.
If we can't breathe, there's not much else we can learn or do. And appropriately enough, our guest today is a scientist, not just an environmental enthusiast like myself. Mary Beth Steislinger is both a restoration biologist and a permaculturist. And before I trip over these words anymore, I'm going to have her describe in detail what she means by that. Mary Beth, it's wonderful to have you on the show.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here. My first thing I'll say is, the whole idea of permaculture is pretty much relating to the idea of ecological sustainability. So we're right on track with that.
What inspires you as a scientist, and how did you come to this particular focus in your work?
Well, my focus has always been group or community ecological restoration, and even community farming. I did a lot of CSA, community supported agriculture work over the years. And I'm just a real firm believer in that we need a lot of cooperation and collaboration to address the issues that we're facing today. And my belief is that through that kind of work, we can create more peace, more justice, more sustainability.
Now, could you tell us what is permaculture and how does it fit in with environmental sustainability?
So permaculture really is about creating a permanent culture on the planet. And, to do that, permaculture really addresses the natural sciences and kind of cultural norms, the way our economies operate, the way we sort of design things. Permaculture is all about really honoring the divinity and wisdom in nature by really focusing on mimicking nature in our systems.
And could you tell us a little bit more about how we do that and about this mimicry? Because I haven't heard that before, and perhaps some of our audience is really curious to know about that as well.
Well, one of the things that nature is brilliant at is creating no waste. Everything is cyclical in nature. Waste that's created by animals is then used by plants and soil organisms, and everything cycles through. It's the hydrologic cycle of the sun evaporating the water, and then that cycling back through the plants, and the trees sort of breathing out oxygen and bringing up the water from the hydrologic cycle and releasing that into the air. And so everything is cyclical in nature. Nature does not create any garbage. Everything is reused. So permaculture is about looking at how to do those sort of things. For instance, mainly in agriculture, permaculture looks at agricultural systems that mimic forests and meadows. And we're thinking about these deep roots and a lot of perennials, and then the annuals are sort of, nested in with the perennial plants. A lot of places in the equatorial regions or the semi-tropical regions of the world do a lot of forest gardening, where they plant hedgerows and then plant their perennial crops in between, or their annual crops in between the perennial crops.
That's fascinating. And how can we apply this to the environmental crises we're having today? There's so many crises in the world, so many facets of life, and not the least of which is the environment. What gives you hope? How can you share that hope with others? And how do you respond to people, to cynics who say it's already too late?
Well, that is a good question, because I think all of us have felt that at one time or another. And I would say 30 years ago in my 20s, I was pretty despondent, looking around, seeing what was going on, seeing the destruction of the environment, seeing the explosion of human population, and not enough education to go along with that. And so I luckily came across some information that Michelle Small-Wright was working on and putting out in the world through her nature research organization, Paralandra. And she was looking at working directly, co-creatively with nature. And when I say that, I mean she did studies to show that she could co-creatively work with nature spirits, the Devic realm, which is also known as the angelic realm, and this group of enlightened guides of the race who are called the Masters of Wisdom, or the Lords of Compassion, or the Great Teachers. So she worked with them directly, and I was just fascinated by that, because I'd grown up Catholic and knew about the saints and knew about, I had an inroad to, being open to this a little bit. And that led me to the ancient wisdom teachings as shared by Benjamin Creme.
how does the ageless wisdom teaching connect with today's environmental movement in your eyes?
Sure. Well, I would say the key thing, the key word you used is unity. And what the ageless wisdom teachings talk about, and just to, reiterate this for people, if I wasn't clear as I started talking about this, the ageless wisdom teachings really underlie all the world's major faith traditions. So all the mystic sects of the various programs, whether it's the Essenes or the Kabbalah or, mystic Hinduism or Islam, really talk a lot about these teachings and the unity of all things and the diversity that is humanity that utilizes this unity in different ways. So let's see, mainly I would say we can think of all of evolution, the kingdoms in nature, from the mineral kingdom through the plant kingdom, through the animal kingdom, to the human kingdom, as all being in a large flow of evolution. And even from the human kingdom, then there's the spiritual kingdom, of which the masters of wisdom have graduated. They've learned the lessons of the school of the earth, and they now are graduated and helping the evolution of the earth. Those who decide to stay and focus on the earth evolution, they can also go on to do other things, supposedly, in the universe. So we're really looking at this kind of interconnected evolutionary process that also is very tied into the Devic kingdom or the angelic kingdom. And it's said that devas uphold the forms in nature. So the oak tree and the aspen and the rose all have that Devic pattern, that angelic pattern that is consistent. And eventually they say, humanity, work co-creatively with the Devic realm, the angelic realm, and really learn to heal what we have damaged and create a heaven on earth, because we will be working within the laws of nature.
That's wonderful. I can't wait for that happenstance. And connecting this to, going back to the ageless wisdom teaching, I wanted to touch upon Benjamin Creme, the artist and esotericist and author, who has taught us so much about this emergence of the world teacher Maitreya and the masters of wisdom, following in the footsteps of people like Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky. I know that he was speaking from his own experience in the main, and that forms the basis of much of what we discuss here on Planetary Makeover. And so I was wondering how that had inspired you and how your work, thus inspired, ties in with Maitreya's priorities as outlined by Benjamin Creme.
Well, yes. I mean, one of the things I think is phenomenal about Ben's work is that he takes information from the ageless wisdom teachings that Alice Bailey, Helena Blavatsky, Helena Roerich, and many other authors who worked with the masters, he takes that and really steps it down to make it very accessible for people who maybe don't have a big background in philosophy or a big background in, sort of technical information. And I think it's been said that, the average 8th grader, or maybe it's 9th grader, can really apprehend everything in the books that Benjamin Creme and his master wrote. And I would say that, specifically, I really like his book, The Art of Cooperation, because it is about how we work together in groups to address some of these large crises issues that are, threatening humanity and our way of life here on Earth.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the age that can absorb this information, because I think I remember Benjamin Creme saying in one of his books that a 14-year-old today has about the same consciousness level as a scholar from the Middle Ages. So apparently we are making progress. And in terms of environment, Tell us, Mary Beth, what can we do in our daily lives as individuals, as families, as communities? How can we learn from nature and develop these practices that you have mentioned as a way of being so that we're doing it intuitively?
That is a very good question. And I think for me personally, my practice has been to look at my own personal impact on the planet. You know, I've been really working towards going towards zero waste for a long time. I compost almost everything. I've got various compost barrels cooking in my gardens in a few different locations. And I always keep a waste basket separate from a true garbage basket. So the waste is recyclable things that can turn into compost and soil. And then the garbage is then things like, you know, plastics that I can't recycle for the most part.
And that brings us back to what you had mentioned about cooperation and sharing. So if you could reiterate a little bit more, and again, for our audience, what does sharing mean? And how does this tie in with permaculture and what you just mentioned, the cycle of nature? And again, what gives you hope knowing all of this?
Let's see, what was the first question again?
That was, sorry, that was too many questions in at one time. What does sharing mean in this, in this context?
Well, you know, to me, it's one of the most interesting things I've learned about Maitreya's teachings is that sharing is a key to the direction that we need to go in as a society, as a race, to really try something that has not been tried systematically and on a large international scale. And so, you know, for individuals, I think it's like, you know, sharing things out of your garden, you know, giving of your time and your energy in ways that feel good and aligned with your purpose. But when the masters talk about it, they're really talking about sharing on an international scale. And so what I have read in the Ageless Wisdom teachings is that the masters believe that humanity should create a global trust, that each nation could give over into that trust that which they have in excess, whether it's natural resources or technology or expertise of some sort. And then, you know, considering food, which is one of my main interests, that might be, you know, food that is preserved and that is in excess, non-perishable, that they can have in this trust. And then if whenever any nation really faces starvation or faces, you know, ecological crises or disease or what have you, and they're just really faltering, we will have different things to give these people out of this global trust. And one of the things that I've heard that I think is really interesting is that the trust itself, like the trust between peoples, will grow so immensely over, you know, a short period of time through this process, that this will be the key that will lead to permanent peace on earth, because we will really be caring for each other in such a thoughtful and, you know, humanitarian way.
Do you see it as a possibility that we can get motivated enough and shake off our complacency and actually do this work that you've just outlined and save the planet?
Well, from what I know as a scientist and someone, my master's degree is in sustainable systems. And so I've studied, you know, and I continue to look at and study and research all the latest and greatest things that are being developed by humanity. And it's not just the latest technology, it's, you know, ways of working together, ways of working more intelligently with nature, or ways of working more intelligently with local people on the ground in their place, because of course, local people know the most about their local environment. And so I believe we have, you know, 90%, if not 95% of the tools and the means and the processes that we need to remake this world into a place where everyone can have their basic needs met. I think the main thing is that there is a lot of resistance from those who have power when it comes to the fossil fuel industry, possibly the way the banking industry works, possibly the way the media systems work now. And so I think it's up to humanity, it's up to the average people on the street to galvanize themselves, to organize across, various movements to demand that things change where they need to change. And, for me, that would be starting with climate change issues and with issues of preventable disease and starvation, which, we can absolutely fix. Benjamin Krem said, and it's one of the things I love about him, that, we have an excess of food on the planet, 12% excess. And that easily we can, on a regular basis, weekly or what have you, have 2 loaves of bread per person. I mean, that's plenty for, people who are just on the edge of starvation. That's a lot. And so that's possible.
And I know you just touched upon a really key point. I know that Mr. Krem had also said in one of his books, goods, especially food, stacked stories high in huge facilities, sometimes inside of mountains in the western part of America, where the government is storing it in case there's some sort of nuclear holocaust. Of course, not realizing that such a war would only last a couple of weeks and there'd be nobody left to eat any of this food. So it could be transforming the lives of people across the globe, and instead it's being eaten by rodents at this time. So I'm wondering globally, which I know you've already touched upon, if you could reiterate some of that too. Globally, what will these solutions look like, and how will we do it? I was thinking of young up-and-coming environmentalists too, like Greta Thunberg.
Well, for instance, we talked about biomimicry a little bit, and, I know that what Maitreya and the masters have said is that, humanity will really revamp all of our systems. So, what would transportation look like if it was fully powered by solar? These electric trains and electric cars, and the cars and all manufacturing itself would be cyclical. So the Germans have done a lot of work in this direction. Decades ago, they were working on what they called the Blue Point system, which was, manufacturing that really could be almost all recyclable. And there's been a lot of talk about, manufacturers owning their product and people just leasing them until they break down, and then they take them back and revamp them and remake them and send them back out again, which I think would be fabulous, especially if there was no bad effluent and no bad, heavy metal pollution. That's, we have to really get serious about that, because the pollution in the world is not diminishing when it comes to non-biodegradable chemicals and, heavy metals that aren't chelated like they would be if we composted our sewage sludge, for instance. A lot of the time it's just spread right on fields or, areas they're trying to reclaim. It's a horrendous practice, especially when we know how to compost. We just aren't doing it. We're not taking the time, and it's so much better for the plants and the animals and the water and all of us.
So this biomimicry can go across, it seems, every facet of our lives.
Well, one in particular that I'm very excited about is if you read another one of the books that Benjamin Krem wrote with his master. They're called Maitreya's Mission. And it talks about the way that the masters and Maitreya will inspire humanity to really remake our cities into literally, havens on earth for ecological examples of sustainability. So imagine green roofs everywhere. Imagine architectural surfaces covered with green living plants. Imagine buildings that acted like leaves, that they absorbed the sunlight and then produce energy. So buildings that themselves were generators of energy, not energy sinks. And I think, we'll see more and more living buildings. So buildings that actually have living walls that are connected to the soil and trees that are integrated into the architecture. You can see it now today if you go on the internet and search for it, but it's just amazing to think about. I remember when I was a kid, I saw this National Geographic about these tribes in South America that wove bridges across rivers with living trees and vines. And, you know, that sort of thing is just really exciting to me, because to have living structures that, you know, we can really interact with is just.
And that became a ritual for them too. I'm not sure, I'm thinking of the same tribe that they would remake those bridges once a year or every couple of years, something like that. And everybody got involved.
Right, yeah, it was kind of a community art form, which is wonderful.
And the cities, can you tell us more about that? I know that I had read in one of Benjamin Krem's books where they called it the Masters of Wisdom's Beautification of the Cities program, which I think they said would be in full swing within a century. And what that would look like as far as housing, business, manufacturing, parks, all manner of green space. Could you paint a picture for us of that?
Well, it's one of my favorite things to think about, certainly. I live in a couple urban areas at different times of the year and on a farm during the winter. And so it's really always kind of interesting to go back and forth between the city and, you know, the countryside and think about how we could bring that into the cities. I've been working in urban farming for quite a while as well. I helped to start Grow Pittsburgh, which is an urban farming organization in Pittsburgh that does incredible, wonderful work working with young people and teaching them how to grow food. And so I think growing a lot of food in the cities and having a lot of edible landscapes around will be big. I know there's two particularly interesting organizations I love to mention. One's called fallenfruit.org, and the other one is called Ripe Near Me. And I think it's like ripenear.me. So it's an app that you can get. And you know, think about if people could just figure out what fruit trees were in bloom that were in public places and just go and, you know, get a wonderful healthy snack. And it's a way to also improve health through good nutrition and to, you know, improve food security for those who are low income. And certainly in the cities, a lot of younger children don't have access to fresh, healthy food. And so I'm a huge fan of that. And one of the things I like to do with my neighbors is when someone dies or a baby's born or someone has an important anniversary or birthday, to get together with some of my neighbors and give them a fruit tree. We of course ask permission first. Are they interested? And usually they are. And so I've been creating block orchards and what I call berry alleys in the urban areas where I live. And that's been really a wonderful thing.
So thank you so much, Mary Beth, for joining us and enlightening us, educating us, and giving us hope. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends. We appreciate your comments and we respond to them.